United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we do have a ceremonial matter, but before that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Madison for a request to adjourn in memory of a couple of residents and Mr. Wilson as well. First, Mr. Madison.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Pasadena lost two real pillars of the community, Joan Calouette and Mike Cornwell, in recent weeks. And I'd like to ask my colleagues respectfully to adjourn in their memory and their honor. Joan Calouette was a longtime resident of Pasadena, was very involved in numerous local causes, including Planned Parenthood, the Huntington Gardens and Library, the Pasadena Garden Club, just a very active participant in community affairs. She's preceded in death by her husband of 63 years, Jim Calouette, who many of us knew as well, lives behind an outstanding family in the generations below. And then Mike Cornwell, I know many of you will remember my friend and constituent Mike Cornwell, who lived much of his adult life in Los Angeles, but then relocated to Pasadena about 20 years ago and has always had an active sense of civic engagement and plunged into city affairs. We would regularly see Mike at community meetings and even in the council chamber addressing various topics. He was described by many as a character, and I think he took some pride in that. He was also a veteran, a colonel in the Army Reserve, who would sometimes playfully answer his phone as the colonel. And again, Mike was also preceded, sadly, in death by his late wife, Diane Cornwell. So two real salt of the earth members of our community, and I appreciate it very much, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madison, and I'd like to join in your request. Both are significant contributors to our city, and we regret both of their losses, and certainly our city should honor them with adjournment in their memory. And Vice Mayor Wilson also has a request that he'd like to make, and I'm going to join him also in that request, but go ahead. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Gordo. And to add to the loss of two residents that Steve just mentioned, I would like to add the unfortunate loss of Peggy York. As some may know, District 7 resident Margaret Peggy York passed away on Sunday, October 17th, at the age of 80. Peggy had an outstanding career with the Los Angeles Police Department, where she served as a supervisor, lieutenant, captain, commander, the first woman to become a deputy chief. York was initially appointed to the LAPD in 1965, my birth year, as a telephone operator before she became a policewoman in 1968, at a time when women were only allowed to work in certain assignments. I'd point out that in March, the LAPD announced their academy class this year was 50% women. So a real change maker, I think, with Peggy's work. After retiring from her groundbreaking career at the LAPD, Peggy was appointed the chief of police for the Los Angeles County Police Department and continued to do consulting work for the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Peggy was also served on the advisory board of the Salvation Army and regularly supported the American Cancer Society. Peggy ran for city council in District 7 in 2009, and she made it to the runoff before losing to former Mayor Terry Tornick. Peggy, with her husband of 40 years, Judge Lance Ito, lived in Madison Heights, actually just around the corner from me, was active in the neighborhood. Together, they were indeed a dynamic duo. She'll be greatly missed by all of us. Our condolences and prayers go out to Lance and all of Peggy's family. Mayor, I'd like to request we also adjourn today's meeting in honor of Peggy York.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson. I see Mr. Masuda's got his hand up. I'll turn to Mr. Masuda before making comments. Mr. Masuda.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Wilson, for remembering Peggy York. She was a dear friend. I got to meet her when I was a neighborhood representative years ago, and she was very supportive of so many things that we did. I appreciated her friendship, her leadership. She was just a wonderful person. She was a great volunteer for so many different issues and organizations. I enjoyed speaking to her, and when I asked her for some advice, she was always there for some wonderful advice. So, Mayor, I want to join Councilmember Wilson and the rest of the council to remember Peggy York and to adjourn in her name as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Masuda.
Mayor.
I would just like to again weigh in. Peggy York and Judge Ito are two great contributors to our city, both friends of mine, and I know that friends to many of us around the dais. And Peggy York was a trailblazer, not just in Pasadena, but in the area of policing at one of the largest departments in the country. We are all sad to see Peggy go, and I will again reduce the council's thoughts and comments related to all three of the residents that we've lost and are honoring tonight, and make a call to Judge Ito as well on behalf of the city council, and invite all of you to do the same. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to, yes. Next, we'll move on to a special presentation involving a longtime business in Pasadena, one that we all know well. If we can bring on Mark Fetty. Mark. Mr. Fetty, welcome. We're proud to honor you as one of the legacy businesses in the city of Pasadena. And colleagues and members of the public today, we're pleased to recognize Fetty Furniture, founded in 1937 by Arnold and Ellen Fetty on the same block where it currently stands today. They started this home furnishing business during difficult economic times and with the simple goal of offering competitive prices on the quality products that would provide comfort and satisfaction to each customer. In 1963, Don Fetty took over as president, and today the third generation, Mark and Melinda Fetty Kenny, continue the family tradition. Over the years, Fetty Furniture expanded their showroom and grew to 2 locations. In addition to their home furnishing business, the Fetty family has also been very active in our community and supports organizations including Ability First, Mach 1, Move a Child Higher, Pasadena Heritage, and the Pasadena Community Foundation, the Navy League, and the Navy League, Pasadena Navy League. In addition, Don Fetty served as president of the Pasadena Tournament of Roses in 1990, while Mark Fetty served over 25 years as a member of the tournament. Being a third generation business with longtime roots in Pasadena is something to celebrate. Congratulations to Fetty Furniture on 84 years of business and service to the community. Thank you to Fetty Furniture for your active civic engagement and your contributions to the Pasadena community. Best of luck in the future, Mark, to you and your family, and congratulations on so many successes and so many contributions over so many decades. Did you want to say?
Mayor, if I may.
But let's give Mr. Fetty an opportunity, Mr. Kennedy, and I'll turn back to you if that's okay.
I would like to say a few words about Mr. Fetty.
Sure. Let me give Mr. Fetty an opportunity to say hello, and then I'll turn to you, Mr. Kennedy. Mark?
Thank you very much for recognizing what our family has tried for 84 years in serving the Pasadena community. And as I look at the screen here and see many of our wonderful customers who, quite frankly, that's why we're here, is because of how fortunate we've been to be able to go ahead and have the support of not only this community, but obviously many customers throughout the Pasadena area. We've seen a lot of changes in Pasadena for many years, and it's quite interesting to see the direction and how they continue to grow and value what's happening in the community. I was always raised by my father to understand that partnerships are everything, and what that means to our business and to our excellent staff, long-term staff, and the partnership with the city of Pasadena has been a great deal for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fetty. Thank you, Mark. And next, I'll turn to members of the council, starting with Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say to Mark and to Don and the Fetty family, just an extraordinary contribution that you've made to Pasadena. I know that sitting on that corner on Colorado, that you've served everyone who has come in your doors with kindness and respect. And that's important in Pasadena, particularly 80+ years of service. When I came to Don and asked him to support African Americans, the tournament, he stepped up quickly, and that was something that I'll never forget, his willingness to just step up and be counted. Certainly, like possibly many others who have historic homes, we may have several pieces that we purchased from Fetty Furniture and that have been totally satisfied with those purchases. There's a story of a young man who came from Mexico, who worked for Fetty Furniture essentially all of his life. And he would tell me the kindness of the Fetty family to him. It was also a great loss when he passed, and Don and the whole Fetty organization acknowledged that relationship. By chance, Mark, if you're still on the line, do you recall the gentleman's name?
Yes, you're talking about Reyes Ratana, and my grandfather hired him, and he was part of our company. He was part of our family. He was our family for 55 years, and what a true gentleman. He meant the world to us as family first, and what he did to this community in St. Andrew's Church and such. So thank you for saying that very much.
So thank you, Mark, a fellow Trojan, and thank you, Don, for just being outstanding and outstanding. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I'll let the record reflect that Ms. Gutierrez and I just looked at each other and smiled because Reyes Ratana is someone that we know well. And his wife actually was very close to my family, a member of the Mejia family, and would pick me up from elementary school and drive me home. She was the only person at Willard when I was in first grade who spoke Spanish, and she worked in that office. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Hey, Mark, I have to hold my computer up because if you can look at all this Stickley furniture in my home office, all 12 pieces are from your shop. So I feel like I'm in the shrine to the Fetty Furniture location because of the Stickley Mission furniture in my home office. So congratulations.
Thank you very, very much.
Mr. Masuda, we're going to get a view of your furniture.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mark, congratulations. And I too have a house full of your furniture, and thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The one thing that I want you to know that when it was mentioned about on your corner there, especially during the Rose Parade in 2013, both my son's grandmothers saw him walk the as an Eagle Scout the Rose Parade. So I wanted you to know that. I don't think I ever told you that before. I don't talk a lot about that, but I really appreciate your business and what you do and the work the work that you continue to do as a volunteer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that completes, again, congratulations, Mark, to you and your family for all the contributions to our Pasadena community. To another
Thank you very much.
84 years, and we'll see you when you turn 100. We'll know it because Mr. Wilson will also turn 100. Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move on to public comment for matters not on the agenda.
Public comment will be limited to a total of 20 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and will continue at the conclusion of the meeting if necessary. Comments are limited to 3 minutes each. The council will not discuss or take action on issues not on the meeting agenda, except that members of the city council or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by persons exercising public testimony rights. A member of the public shall only address the body from the members of the public shall direct comments to the body as a whole and not to staff, individual members of the body, or the public. No person shall be permitted to interrupt members of the body, staff presentations, or members of the public who are at the microphone during a meeting. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks about members of the body, staff, or the public, or who shall become boisterous or threatening or personally abusive of the body, staff, or members of the public shall be asked by the mayor to cease and desist such activity and may be requested or required to leave the meeting in the event the behavior continues to disrupt the meeting proceedings. With that statement, Sam Bills has a card in but is not present in the meeting, so we will turn to Jane Ward, followed by Kat Ross, followed by Vanessa Kale.
Hello, City Council members. Chief Perez has stated that witnesses told Pasadena PD investigators that Anthony McLean had a gun. But new information released today on Pasadena Black Pages reveals that one of the two witnesses on the scene, the witness closest to the incident, said Anthony McLean did not have a gun. The police also took a statement from someone who was not at the scene, but who they met to get information on another case, and who told them that he had heard through the grapevine that Anthony McLean had a gun. This person later withdrew their statement and said it was inaccurate, but the police continue to represent this as a legitimate witness testimony. This is witness manipulation and corruption. It is time to fire Chief Perez for his role in protecting the officers who murdered Anthony McLean, and Steve Mermel for his failure to ensure that the Pasadena Police Department is free of this kind of corruption. I also want to say that as a white person, I am humbly grateful to the Black leaders who have helped me to see the deep-rootedness of anti-Blackness in the way that American cities and neighborhoods have been and still are policed, including and especially in Pasadena. So speaking as one white person to some others, Steve Madison and Andy Wilson, the white members of the body, I'm wondering if you have noticed that the colleagues of yours who have been most vocal and engaged in addressing police accountability are two Black men. And I'm wondering why you are leaving this injustice to them to address. I think we know why, but it doesn't need to be that way.
Ms.
So
Ward, if you'll direct your comments to the body, and it would really work well if you didn't also make race-based comments towards members of the council.
Well, we're talking about a race-based issue here, but yes. So I want to extend a personal invitation to the leaders of our diverse community who themselves are not targeted by racist policing. I'm using a euphemism there. I think we know what I'm saying. To break the silence about anti-Black police violence and step up and do the right thing. You can join us in demanding the
1 minute.
firing of officers involved in the murder of Anthony McLean, because Anthony McLean's life mattered and he was shot in the back while running away. And you could also join us at a Showing Up for Racial Justice meeting, because that's where we get together to mobilize white people to end their support for white supremacy. And we would really love to see Steve Madison and Andy Wilson with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Kat Ross, followed by Vanessa Kale, followed by Alan Shea. Ms. Ross, go ahead.
I'm calling in to ask the City Council to agendize officer-involved shooting policies for the entire council. I believe there are enough votes for the City Council to instruct the city manager to create a policy requiring that the administrative review of an officer must conclude within 9 months of the incident. This would change the current practice of waiting sometimes years for other agencies to finish their proceedings before officers are held to account in Pasadena. The policy should require administrative reviewers to conduct their own thorough investigation, including interviewing witnesses, taking depositions, sworn officer statements, reviewing video and audio evidence, so they can be confident in their findings. The review of policy in the Public Safety Committee made it clear that the City Council can act and can act as soon as it's agendized. Waiting longer than 9 months to investigate is a bad practice for the good officers who want to work in a just and equitable system, for the community to have any trust in our city or its police, for the family to heal. Can you imagine having to see the person who killed your son walking on your street? Do this for Pasadena. Pasadena needs a city council to stand up for the health and safety of its community. For us to feel safe, we need to know that officers who beat or kill our neighbors are held accountable for their actions. Complete the administrative review of the officers in Anthony McLean's case and hold Officer Dumaguindin accountable for killing Anthony.
Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Vanessa Kale, followed by Alan Shea, followed by Brian Brenhog. Vanessa?
Hello, council members. Oh,
Yeah, go
hello,
ahead.
council members. Okay, hello, council members. My name is Vanessa Kale. I live in Altadena. I consider Pasadena, particularly North Pasadena, to be part of my community. Robinson Park hosted Central Altadena Little League last spring when our own park could not open for the season. I am saddened that a fellow citizen, Anthony McLean, was unnecessarily killed in a traffic stop. I am disappointed that the city has not fired police officers or implemented a program of mandatory discipline for police misconduct. Please agendize the Anthony McLean shooting, and please make office or involved shooting investigations fully transparent. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll bring in Alan Shea. Alan, *6 to unmute.
Mr. Shea.
Go ahead.
Hello, Honorable Victor Gordo and City Council members. As you know, I try and check in every Monday and remind this panel here that you are the governance of the city and you certainly set the standards. As you're well aware, I've called out the corruption that has taken place with the Anthony McLean's murder. I've also indicated that Anthony did not have a gun. It was planted by Pasadena City Police on the east side of the street. The video shows it. I brought it to your attention. These kind of discussions are not going to go away unless you act properly. All you're going to do is allow it to continue to fester and get longer and get more irate with people calling. We could utilize our energies in a much better way if people step up to the plate. So all this kind of dodging the responsibility is absurd. There should be no reason. We have posted the voice of the community for 428 days. You guys can go to Facebook and look for yourself. That's not going to stop until some firing takes place. You need to fire John Perez. You need to fire the officers, all the officers that was associated with the corruption. The trust in the community is not going to come back until those things are done. I have committed to 11 years of being a commissioner for the Northwest community just to make sure that they have their due respect. And look what happened. Even with all the cameras that are provided, there's still ways that the police department and the city council manipulates the accountability. That's absurd. Everybody on that council should be embarrassed.
1 minute.
You really should be. Because this is something that should have been done immediately based on the videos that John Perez said the video speaks for itself. That's all you have to do is hold him responsible that the video speaks for itself and quit playing around with all these excuses. That's absurd. It's making the city look bad. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Brenhog, followed by Michael Williams, followed by Hiram Cormier Jr.
Good evening, council members. First, I would like to express my thanks for this opportunity to address you. I live in the San Gabriel Valley, and I'm speaking to you tonight in a personal capacity. My family and I attend one of the churches in the city of Pasadena, which currently provides affordable housing units on its property. I wanted to express my support tonight for the church rezoning initiative. I have 2 elementary-aged children, and over the past few years, I have noticed many of my children's classmates have been forced to choose between leaving the San Gabriel Valley and moving east, or, if they want to maintain friendships and roots they have built locally, continuing to rent and foregoing the opportunity to build wealth associated with homeownership. I love Pasadena, and I do not want Pasadena and the San Gabriel Valley to turn into another West Side with families forced out. I particularly want to encourage the council members to seek this approval as by right rather than discretionary. I believe as council members, you are aware of the immensity of the affordable housing problem. It will take many different initiatives to counter the economic forces accelerating housing prices beyond wage growth. Some of the solutions will be increasing the supply and size of developments. Some will rest in policy and regulation. Some will need to be actions by individuals and coming up with the incentives to do so. What appeals to me about the church rezoning in particular is that it builds from the local community itself, and there are churches throughout Pasadena. I believe this is saying we as a community can make a difference. We as Pasadena churches need to make this a movement, not a one-time project. If it is a couple projects done as discretionary, it will be a nice thing that these couple churches did, but there will be clear friction in the path of other churches wanting to follow suit. I believe when we see churches standing up and making commitments like this, it will inspire more local Pasadena churches to do so as well. And if it is by right, there will be a clear path to do so. Thank you, council members, for your time and consideration of this matter.
Thank you. Bring in Michael Williams, followed by Hiram Cormier Jr. We have cards submitted for Wendy and Jason R., but they are not checked in, so we'll probably move over to Heavenly Hughes. Mr. Williams, go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Of course, I am calling for asking for the firing of the officers that were involved in Anthony McLean's murder. But as you all know, because you were sent information about the case, that there's more to this story than that we realize. And what the community had been saying about what the police did that night is being proven true. There's now new information that Anthony McLean murder was attempted to be covered up. And 2 officers were potentially going to get away with murder because of falsified witness statements and ignored witness statements that the police provided. This should be a fireable offense. There should be an immediate investigation into the police department because of it, internally and externally. Those officers whose names are listed on the document that you all have received should be fired immediately. And Officer Maroney and Dumaguindin should be fired immediately, along with the other officers, Serrano. They all should be fired immediately today. Also, Stephen Mell should have resigned immediately, not waiting until December. Immediately resign, because under his watch and under Michelle Bagneris's watch, this was filed in a public arena where witnesses' names and information were published to the whole community.
1 minute.
Putting their lives in danger, putting their lives at risk. This is a shamble. This is something that the city council should immediately do something about. Not 2 weeks from now, not after an investigation, immediately. Immediately fire and ask for the resignation of Steve Mermel, immediately ask for the resignation of John Perez, immediately ask for the resignation of Michelle Bagneris, and immediately terminate every single officer that had any involvement with the case regarding Anthony McLean. This proves corruption and cover-up and collusion. And I don't think this is the last of the information that we're going to receive about this case. Do it now. Do it now.
Thank you.
Next.
Hiram Cormier Jr., followed by, well, Wendy is not available still, and Jason R. is not available, so we'll go to Heavenly Hughes after Hiram.
Mr. Cormier?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yep. I support every single word that the previous speaker said, as well as the cause for other previous speakers, for the officers to be fired, for justice to be brought in the name of Anthony McLean. I also support, again, the immediate resignation or firing of Mermel, Chief of Police Perez, and the city attorney, and really all the council members who hesitate to bring justice to this case. The information that came out in that article and in that document, as previous speaker said, proves everything that we already knew, is that this whole thing is a cover-up, the whole thing is a farce, and everything that y'all do is a lie. So this city is so deceitful, especially to Black people. You do not treat us fair in any capacity at all, especially when it comes to putting bullets in our backs and kneeling on them and watching us bleed to death. That shouldn't happen to anybody. And the fact that it happened, y'all keep dragging it out and dancing on people's graves is crazy. It reminds me, like, you know, when I was 13, and Trayvon Martin was killed and the verdict came in not guilty. And I remember how I felt that night and how many people all around this world, around this country felt about that shit. Helpless, hurt, disrespected, just so confused. That's how I feel this whole process, watching this since August 15th of 2020, last year, all the way till now, is the same way I feel now. I don't know why you're smirking, Mr. Wilson. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. There is no, where is your heart, for real? Where is your compassion? Makes me sick. It really does. You know, again, those cops need to be gone. They really do. You know, in the public safety committee meeting a few weeks ago, y'all talked about you
1 minute.
because POBAR, because the police officer bill of rights, which is bullshit. We know who wrote that. Cop sympathizer, obviously. But regardless, where's the bill of rights for Black lives? Where's the bill of rights for Black people? If we had half the protection the pigs do, maybe this shit wouldn't happen. If y'all had half the time that you're supposed to have, maybe some would have been done already. You would stop having us call in every week so you can hear about this shit. Stop. Make it happen. Or should I say start? Make it happen. I don't know. Y'all get the point. But, you know, we're the ones who go through it. We're the ones who have to feel the bullets. We're the ones who have to be denied housing, health care, our human rights, our humanity. What does it mean for me what does life mean to me when all I do is die? What does that mean to me? It don't mean shit to me.
Your time has
Nothing at
expired,
all.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier.
Fire those
Heavenly Hughes, followed by Victor Hodson. And those will be the last, there's about 4 minutes left, 4.5 minutes left. They'll be the last in the 20-minute initial public comment.
Ms. Hughes?
Ms. Hughes, go ahead and unmute.
Hello, my name is Heavenly Hughes, co-founder of My Tribe Rise. I want my whole 3 minutes. Mark, you do not have to interrupt me. I will end at the 3-minute part.
Sounds good.
Also, Mayor Gordo, the murder of Anthony McClain is race-based. The beating of Chris Ballou and so forth and so on, as you have heard on and on again about the safety of Black people in Pasadena. So it is race-based. I will say, thorns on the rose, thorns on the rose. Have you all watched it? I've asked before. Thorns on the rose meaning corruption, collusion, cover-up, abuse, police tampering of evidence, politicians, big money schemes, and lack of public safety. Like I said before, several of you all are shucking and jiving, lying and cheating, and intentionally deceiving the community to benefit your own agendas and your own financial lick or come up. Corruption and abuse and murder, starting with the murder of Reginald Thomas to the violent beating of Chris Ballou, the murder of Anthony McClain, and the big money collusions at the Rose Bowl, the invitation for more corruption with the proposal of ordinance requesting no limit campaign funding. While y'all pockets are getting fat, people are homeless in the streets, and police are killing Black men and not being held accountable for murder. We have read the articles today released by the Pasadena Black pages. Steve Mermel, epic fail. Epic fail. We demand you resign in closed session tonight. You have neglected the welfare of the community and the witnesses in the Anthony McClain case. You have jeopardized their safety. You exposed the tender information about the witnesses and did not ensure their safety. For that reason, resign tonight. We demand you, Steve Mermel, to resign now or tonight in the midnight hours like you have done before. Agendize the officer-involved shooting policies, agendize the Anthony McClain murder, agendize the review of the Pasadena City Charter. We demand you, Mayor Victor Gordo, to keep your word and call me back to discuss how the community can be a part of the steps needed to select a new city manager and a new Pasadena chief. Say his name, Anthony McClain. Say his name, Anthony McClain. We demand justice for Anthony McClain.
Your time has expired. Victor Hodson. Mr. Hodson, go ahead and unmute. You can start. You have
Give the
3.
man justice.
Mr. Hodson, could you start?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. I believe that it is time for our community to address racist police. After George Floyd was killed by the police in Minnesota, Anthony McClain was killed by the police right here in Pasadena. Just like the video of George Floyd's killing, the video of Anthony McClain's killing shows an officer who didn't de-escalate and was under no immediate threat, but who chose to take another Black man's life. Anthony McClain was running away from Officer Edwin Dumaguindin. He was not advancing on or struggling with an officer. He was not pointing a weapon. He was running away. This means it was not necessary for Officer Edwin Dumaguindin to use deadly force to save his own life or protect the community. But like so many officers before him, he saw a Black man running, and his first instinct was to shoot. This cannot be how Pasadena defines public safety. And I hope you know that it's new information that has been found that Pasadena police have been tampering with the words of the community, the witnesses. So there will be more stuff that you guys will be seeing. Pasadena City Council, you have to do better. It's time. We're going into 13, 14 months. I said this before, you cannot keep oppressing the people before they rise, before they uprise, and that's just gonna be more drama in the street. You guys have the power to change it. What are we waiting for? The time is now. Do something. We're asking. We call in every week. How much more are we gonna ask? How much more are we gonna plead and beg that do something? Do something. We need to see action. The officers involved with killing Anthony McClain all need to be fired, and some of you guys can't resign fast enough. Perez, city manager.
45 seconds.
Edwin Dumaguindin needs to be fired immediately. You guys need to, after this, you guys need to sit down and have a round table and start taking action. You can't keep suppressing the people and nothing's gonna happen. Only thing's gonna get worse. You guys got the power to make things better. Bring peace. I digress.
Thank you. That completes public comment on the initial 20 minutes. The following public comment speakers will be called at the end of the meeting. Sarah Brewer Boland, Bert Newton, Georgia Sanders, Jasmine Richards Abdullah, and Adriana Batista. Those cards will be called at the end of the meeting after all the other business is concluded. Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to the consent.
Mayor?
Yes.
If you don't
Mr.
mind,
Hampton?
just 30 seconds. I have not seen the files that have been reported on in Pasadena Black Pages, or that the Conversation Live has access to. But I have requested on multiple times, which we now know, according to the Pasadena Black Pages, based on information that was I don't even want to say mishandled, which was, I guess that is the word for it, mishandled by the attorney firm when submitting the documents to the Pasadena courthouse or to the, let me say, Los Angeles Superior Court, that was obtained by Conversation Live, James Farr. That he actually has the access, he actually has this document. He has not shared this document with me, nor do I know he has shared that document with any of my colleagues on the city council. But I did ask and request that the radio chatter be released with the tapes. The response was, we're going to look into that. Well, based on the information that Mr. Farr has requested in a Public Records Request Act, that information is out there, and we do know that we do have it. So I would like for that information to be released, as well as the officers that were involved in locating the gun that was found that night on Raymond Avenue. So I would like that information. I think that information is key for transparency, and that should be posted. Also, I think that the law firm that was involved in sending out this information, sending out personal information, including social security numbers of witnesses, there should be accountability there as well.
Yeah.
Maybe that law firm should not be working on this anymore, or I don't know exactly what the plan of action is for that, but that is it is ridiculous that people's information were put out like that.
Mr. Hampton.
And I mean, these are professionals. No, 1 second. These are professionals.
We'll have an opportunity.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter that these people's information were put out extremely publicly, including their social security numbers.
Mr. Hampton, we'll have the
How do you
opportunity.
rectify that?
We'll have the opportunity to have that discussion likely in closed session.
Thank you.
Next, consent calendar. Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Kennedy, did you?
I'll be brief. Repeatedly, I've asked staff to tell us if all of the audio and visual evidence has been released to the public, and I have been told that it has by the city manager and others. And if that's not the case, I think it's appropriate that staff would speak up based upon my request and based upon Councilmember Hampton's comments tonight, and tell the council and the community if in fact all of the information we have related to audio visual of the incident and actual incident and subsequent to the incident has been released and is in the public domain. That's what staff has told us, and that needs to take place. Secondly, as the council member, District 1, Councilmember Hampton, where this matter took place, officer involved shooting, I think it's only right to agendize and address questions that he has raised. They are legitimate questions. They deserve an answer, and good government and our fiduciary responsibility requires that we answer them for the public, for the family of Anthony McLean, and for all of the good police officers that work for the Pasadena Police Department. So however that's done, it needs to be done post-haste. Councilmember Hampton has been consistent in his calls for transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Now we'll get to the consent calendar. And is there a motion on the consent calendar? We do have one speaker card for item 1.
Mayor, if I may.
Did you on the consent calendar, Mr. Kennedy?
I'd like to make a sweet motion on the full body of the consent, unless there is a council member who would like to pull something, but I would like to make a quick comment about agenda item 4.
Okay, so you want to hold, so why don't you go ahead and, there's a motion and a second on the entirety of the consent calendar. There's a card on item 1. Why don't we hear that public comment, and then we'll hear Mr. Kennedy's comment on item 4.
Allison Henry.
Ms. Henry?
Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you. Good evening, and I presume you can hear me. Thank you, Mr. Jomsky. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Allison Henry. I'm a resident of District 3 and co-founder of the San Gabriel Valley Tenants Alliance. Many of you know me. Good evening. Recently, my organization did a community event in Villa Park regarding COVID protections for tenants, know your rights, and housing is key application support with our local organizations, Pasadena Collective of the Roses, Adelante Youth Alliance. We did 2 evenings in Villa Park with the community. And as a result, or not as a result, but just doing that event, one of the things that was asked of community members was, what's your greatest concern? And I will tell you that security was in fact flagged as a major concern by everyone who came through our little workshop. So if we had security cameras, which is what this agenda item is, if we had had security cameras in the park to address security, I'm sure that would be welcome. But I would ask you to think a little bit more broadly about security, particularly in relation to the public comments. But if you had security cameras in Villa Park, that security camera would have captured residents applying for rental and utility relief on laptops and phones provided by volunteers. We helped process between 15 and 20 applications on the night of 9/30. Those cameras would have also captured how at 9:50 p.m. we had to wind down help because the lights go out at 10. The cameras would have caught the lack of a city or park-wide internet service that could help folks literally access the internet. Your cameras would have captured the community that gathered around a laptop, phone, and cloth screen, streaming a meeting on police oversight and community oversight board. Your camera could probably zoom in on the phone that was used as a hotspot. I don't submit this comment to shame the city, but rather to provide a fuller picture of additional security support and infrastructure that would be helpful at Villa Park. And to let the city council, mayor, and housing department know that community organizations like mine, the San Gabriel Valley Tenants Alliance, but also others, are pushing out housing is key info. We know that housing is a crisis, but when I think about Villa Park and security cameras, there are other things that we could use, like internet, lights on after 10, and even folks to support application processes like the ones that our organizations did with volunteers. And when we think about security also, maybe it goes beyond cameras in the park. Again, I would ask you all to deeply consider the comments submitted by my fellow residents and local neighbors during public comment. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you. That completes public comment on
Mayor?
consent items.
Mr. Hampton, let's turn to Mr. Kennedy's comment unless you are specifically on item 1.
It was specifically
Okay,
on item 1.
go ahead and then we'll turn to
follow up
Mr.
some of
Kennedy.
the questions that were brought up. I know that we talked about security in our parks as a whole, and I wanted to know when that conversation will be coming back to the full city council to discuss. I have also requested that potentially we use neighbors or volunteer services, or hire a security company that would help, that is unarmed, that would help navigate some of our parks as it relates to security. So I know that you mentioned that would be coming back to us as a discussion item around our parks. Just wanted to flag that again.
Yeah, that matter has been referred to public safety, Mr. Hampton, and
All right.
we'll come through public safety.
Okay, and then to Mrs. Henry's concern about the internet, I know that recently there were upgrades to the internet at Villa Park, and it sounds like there may be some dead zones there at the park. So at least I thought there were upgrades to the internet at Villa Park at the same time the upgrades were made at La Pintoresca, but maybe the city manager could answer that question.
Councilmember Hampton, I have Philip Leclerc, our IT director, here with me, and I'll ask him to touch upon the Wi-Fi out at Villa Park.
Mr. Leclerc, welcome.
Certainly. Just to answer your question, Councilmember, there is Wi-Fi service in Villa Park in the exterior areas as well as in the buildings. There could be some dead zones. We will take feedback about that, and we will do our best to try to increase its coverage and capacity. If you or any of your constituents know of any particular areas we can look into.
I'm sorry, Mr. Leclerc. Maybe if you could get a little closer to the mic because you keep on breaking in and out. At least for me, I don't know if that's just me.
Hi, sorry about that. I was saying that there is Wi-Fi service in Villa Park on exterior areas as well as throughout the building. at the center. But we do take feedback. If there are some dead zones and we can make some modifications, we will. We just need the feedback from the public. So if you have anyone that you know of, you have them refer to us, or we'll do our best to increase coverage and improve those dead zones that may be reported. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like we just had a public commenter that you may want to reach out to then.
We will try.
And that's Miss Henry, Miss Allison Henry.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you for the update. And if there are blackout areas within the park, it's great that your team is going to be working on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. Mr. Kennedy, item 4. Item 4.
Before I get to item 4, Mayor, I'd just simply like to say thank you, Mayor, for in your role as Chair of Public Safety, that we will discuss a series of safety protocols, the panoply of items that we can do to make our park safer and more user-friendly for our community. I think that's critically important. And I want to thank Ms. Henry for her input, her comments, and her leadership related to that area that she just spoke about. As it relates to item 4, we would quickly normally just approve this matter in a perfunctory way, but I think we must call out Bill Wong and his team, the leadership, and Jim Wong, related to this extraordinary tool that's taking place to keep, particularly in my interest, the category of some of the lowest and greatest need of housing in that category into perpetuity by virtue of the action that's going to be taken under agenda item number 4 with the California State Communities Development Authority. I think this is extraordinary. I think it's working, and the more that Bill Wong, as Director of Housing, and Jim Wong, as a Senior Project Manager, brings these items to us, the better our community will be in terms of affordable housing and workforce housing, particularly, but not exclusively, because under workforce, there's extremely low, very low, and low income housing, and it seemingly is touching at least 2 of the primary lower categories of housing that I believe is critically missing, and as some call it, the missing middle, but there is also a level beyond or below the missing middle that needs to be taken a look at by the Housing Task Force, Mayor, and the appropriate committees that you have impaneled, and the body of our subcommittees of the council. So with that, again, I would move all items on consent.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, and ask and you shall receive. They're now present in the chambers, but I'll turn to Mr. Madison first, whose district this is in, and then we can ask for a report on this. This is an important matter, and it winds up an important process and provides affordable housing. Mr. Madison?
Certainly. So are we pulling number 4, Mayor? Is that what's happening?
I don't think so. I think Mr. Kennedy was just making comments. Did you want to make comments or second move? I think it's.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay.
If that's a sweep, pardon?
I think it is a sweep motion.
It is a sweep motion. We have a motion that has been moved and seconded to approve all the consent items.
Okay, then the comment I would add, Mr. Kennedy, is Councilmember Kennedy is absolutely right. This is a great job by our staff. This is the third building in the Westgate complex. It's actually Westgate 1. We had already done 2 and 3, and I'm very proud of staff's work in it as well. And Mr. Kennedy is correct that we're preserving not only the missing middle pieces, which will convert over time to moderate income, so-called workforce housing, but there are, I believe, 96 units of low income and very low income, if I recall, in the building as well, and those will be preserved.
Yeah.
So it's a great outcome. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. And the city clerk, before we take a vote, does have some correspondence to report out.
Thank you, Mayor. 3 letters were received expressing support for the installation of security cameras for item number 1 in Villa Park, with one of the letters stating that the cameras will be a second pair of eyes when police response is not possible. 1 letter was received expressing concerns and providing comments, suggestions for additional security support and infrastructure that would be helpful at Villa Park. All those letters were distributed to the council, posted online, and are part of the record for item number 1.
Thank you. And thank you to Bill and Jim for great work on item 4. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the consent calendar. Roll call.
Councilmember Hampton on the approval of the consent calendar.
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilmember Madison.
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda.
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas.
Yes.
Councilmember Williams.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The consent calendar is approved without opposition.
And again, thank you to everyone, and adds, as council member Madison points out, adds more and Mr. Kennedy adds more affordable housing to our affordable housing stock in a very creative way. Item 4 does. Next, we'll move on to Public Safety Committee, and we'll start with I'm sorry, item 7, I skipped. Yeah, item 7 is old business, pre-development plan review of a new 112-unit senior affordable housing project at 280 Ramona Street and 279 Holly Street. Mr. Reyes, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This is a PPR, which is pre-development plan review, first step in moving towards entitlements for this project, which is designed to be by right. There's a presentation that senior planner, Mr. Andre Sahakian, will be giving this evening, and then we're available, as is the applicant team, for any questions that the council may have.
And while we're waiting for Mr. Sahakian to be brought into the meeting, the city clerk's office received 6 letters expressing gratitude and support for the proposed affordable housing project in the Civic Center. Those letters were posted online, distributed to the city council, and made part of the record for this PPR.
Before we begin, Mayor, could we get a reminder from the city attorney on what we're allowed to say and not allowed to say on PPRs? Thanks.
Yes, with respect to PPRs, to ensure that the due process rights of all impacted are adequately protected, it's important that the council, when listening, not respond with comments that suggest that you have made up your mind or that suggest that you support or oppose a project, because it could come before you in the future, and that would potentially interfere with the ability to ensure that they are getting an open mind when the project is considered. It is okay to ask questions for clarification and get a better understanding of what is being proposed, recognizing that this is an early stage and it's quite possible that the project will be revised before it's final.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes?
Yes, we'll invite Mr. Sahakian in. I believe he's.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Members of the City Council, my name is Andre Sahakian, and I'll be presenting this PPR for you this evening. Next slide, please. So just to give a quick summary of the PPR process, the purpose of this is to achieve better projects through early consultation between city staff and project applicants. Certain projects that are considered to be of community-wide significance that go through the PPR process also come before the City Council for this type of review. And this includes projects greater than 50,000 square feet with at least one discretionary action, projects with 50 or more housing units, or projects determined by the planning director to be of major importance to the city. And so since this project includes 83,050 square feet of senior affordable housing with 112 units, it therefore qualifies as a project of community-wide significance. And as was discussed, this is informational only for tonight and no action is required by the City Council. So just a brief summary of the project itself. The site is located at 280 Ramona Street, or also 279 East Holly Street. It's located here in the Civic Center Historic District, rightly adjacent to the historic YMCA building. It's located in the Central District Specific Plan CD2, which is the Civic Center zoning district. That zoning district allows up to 87 dwelling units per acre under today's code. The site itself is just a hair under an acre at 0.99 acres and is currently vacant with one small storage container located on the site. Here's a vicinity map of the project shown in the red line with a quarter-mile walkability radius shown in yellow. The site's located in the heart of the Civic Center, as we mentioned, and within a quarter-mile of the Memorial Park Metro Station, Memorial Park itself, and the Pasadena Senior Center. Next slide. Here's a closer view of the project site and its vicinity. It's immediately adjacent to the historic YMCA building, which is just to the left, also known as Centennial Place. And that building is currently a 144-unit permanent supportive housing SRO project. These next few slides just show the existing condition from the street view. This would be the south elevation of the site. This next one would be the southeast corner from Holly and Garfield. And the next one would be a view of the north side from Ramona Street, where you can see the YMCA building to the right. When the project was initially submitted for PPR, it included a lot line adjustment, which would have required a tentative parcel map, as well as potentially one or more concessions subject to an affordable housing concession permit. However, since that was submitted, the applicant has been working with the staff, and in response to comments through the PPR process, the need for these entitlements is likely to go away as the project is being refined and is being brought into compliance to reduce or eliminate the need for concessions as well as a lot line adjustment. And so as proposed, the project includes 112 units consisting of studio and one bedroom units, as well as one manager's unit, which would be 2 bedrooms. The unit count is also subject to change as the project is refined. However, the project also includes property management, resident support services, and other on-site amenities for residents that would be located on the ground floor. The project includes 2 courtyards, including one that would be semi-open to the public. It includes one partially subterranean parking structure with 44 parking spaces. And as I mentioned before, it has a total of 83,050 square feet. This next slide shows a site plan of the proposed project, also showing the ground floor configuration. As I mentioned, the details of the floor plan and the site plan have undergone some refinements since this was submitted, and the project is being revised to be brought into compliance with development standards. However, as shown, the ground floor would consist of residential units along Ramona and Garfield, a corner entrance to the semi-public courtyard on the ground floor, and amenities and resident services offices along the Holly Street frontage. And a driveway to the subterranean parking is located at the northwest corner along Ramona. As submitted, the project is consistent with the FAR, height, and density, subject to a 30% density bonus, which is allowed because the project is 100% affordable. As originally submitted, the project did not comply with all required setbacks, including along Ramona Street, Holly, and a portion of the site adjacent to the YMCA building. However, as refinements have been made, it's expected that the project will be in compliance with the setback requirements, potentially with the use of one on-menu concession for a setback. Finally, although no parking is required based on state law for 100% affordable projects, the project does include 44 parking spaces as noted before. This diagram just gives you some context for the proposed project and the existing buildings in the vicinity in terms of height. At approximately 60 feet in height, the project would be consistent with the zoning standards and would also be compatible with the existing heights of existing buildings throughout the Civic Center, which range from 30 to 60 feet, with a couple of notable exceptions that are taller, such as the county courthouse and the Han and Han building. So as mentioned earlier, the original project proposed a lot line adjustment that would have required a tentative parcel map and potentially an affordable housing concession permit, both of which would require review and approval by the hearing officer. However, as the applicant has worked with staff in response to comments, the refinements are being made to reduce or eliminate the need for these entitlements, particularly the lot line adjustment. Besides those, the project would be subject to design review, and it has been recently submitted for a preliminary consultation and would further be subject to concept and final design review prior to approval. The next steps would be for the applicant to formally submit for any necessary entitlements, at which point CEQA review process would begin, and if necessary, a notice public hearing before the hearing officer. Absent any entitlements, the project would be studied under CEQA as part of the design review process, followed by a notice public hearing before the design commission. And that concludes the presentation, and we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions or comments from members of the council? If we could bring the presentation down so we can see everyone. Mr. Kennedy, first in the queue.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to applaud National Corps and all of the folks who are part of this effort to build 112 affordable units housing in our civic center. That kind of, my view, says something about this city council and preceding city council's commitment to such. And thank you very much, Andre Sahakian, for your presentation and your leadership in helping the applicant pull together a project that would meet with the kind of support necessary to hopefully receive the kind of support from the whole city council unanimously. One of the things I'd like to bring to the applicant's attention, is the applicant in the room?
Yes, we have the applicant team standing by available to answer questions.
If you could ask any one applicant, a member of the applicant team, to come to the podium, I'd appreciate it, or be shown on the screen so I can talk directly to them.
Sure, we have 4 members of the applicant team standing by to join the Zoom meeting.
Shall I wait?
We're going to bring him in 1 second.
Yep.
Sure.
First name is Sean. Is that right, Andre?
No, I will
just bring them
tell you
all
the
in.
names in just a moment.
Yeah, we'll bring them all in, Andre.
Just go ahead and bring them all in.
Yeah, we had Mike Ruane, Kevin Chen, Dale Brown, and Gabby Cardenas.
Who's the primary person? So those are a lot of names.
It depends.
Kevin Chen would be the
Kevin Chen. Okay.
representative from National Corps.
Kevin Chen. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Councilman Kennedy.
I want to just applaud you and the other 3 members of your team that he brought to share information with the city council. You may know of a gentleman by the name of Thurgood Marshall. He was the first African-American appointed to the Supreme Court by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. But prior to the appointment, he was a U.S. District Court judge and the Solicitor General of the United States. But in his role as a judge, he sought to address some of the issues that you in your role are doing so in terms of meeting housing needs. And where there was housing discrimination, he was the one on behalf of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which he represented, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So rather than delve down into details, it strikes me as a wonderful possible irony that on one side of the street where it's going to be located, meaning the development, in the rear, I think that would be considered the rear, would be Ramona. And the other side is called Thurgood Marshall. And I never fully understood why a previous council bifurcated and used Ramona.
Mr. Kennedy, is there a question for Mr. Chin? Or that's a question probably for someone else.
So I'm asking for their representative. They make their own decision on who, Mayor. So the question is, given that the role that Thurgood Marshall played in housing rights all across the United States as a Supreme Court Justice, Solicitor General, and head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, might you consider expanding the naming convention that you've already announced for this particular development? That is my question, Mayor. Thank you for helping me bring that to a close.
Thank you.
So just that I understand it, you're asking about the name of the project itself, what we intend to call it once it is built?
Yes, I think I saw that it was Ramona something.
Yeah, that is a placeholder. That is definitely a placeholder. We typically do not select a name until we've gotten input, both primarily from the city and the folks who care most about the project. So definitely, we have not committed to a name, and I think that's definitely a consideration. We will keep that in mind, and we will share that possibility with other folks, including yourself.
Okay. So as a council member for the area, I just wanted to share that in a public way that may be a wonderful name given what he did for public housing and public housing advocacy as in his various professional roles in America. So thank you for the opportunity to address that small issue.
Any other questions for Mr. Chin? I see Ms. Cardenas has joined us as well. Mr. Brown, Dale Brown. Otherwise, we'll thank you for your efforts and congratulate you on moving forward. We do have one public comment. Okay, and oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams has a question for staff. Do you have a question before
Yes.
before Mr. Chin leaves in the event that?
Well, it's actually a question for staff.
Okay.
So I think that's.
Go ahead and then we'll go to public comment.
So what is the maximum height of the proposed building and then the height width averaging?
The maximum height as proposed is 59 feet and 9 inches. And that the project is not proposing to use height averaging.
Okay. And what's the maximum allowed height? Since City Hall is 59, right? So that
I
would be
believe
higher than City
portions
Hall?
of City Hall are taller, but the allowed height for this site under existing zoning is 60 feet. So the proposed height is within that.
Okay. And then in the presentation, you mentioned the entitlements that they had been considering, but what do we know what the final entitlements are that they'll be requesting?
It's still under review as part of preliminary consultation. We've been working on finding ways to refine the project to eliminate the need for entitlements, but it may be a combination of on-menu concessions, which do not require an entitlement, and potentially a off-menu concession, but that is still being worked out.
Councilmember, the applicant has stated, and the architect has talked to us about their desire to stay within our local menu and just go straight to design commission. And so I think we're hopeful that we can get them there and they won't need an affordable housing concession permit.
Okay, so they're targeting by right.
Yes, they're targeting by right
for this
project.
development. Okay. Okay, those are my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Vice Mayor Wilson was next.
Yeah, pretty quick question, I think, for Andre. I noticed in the staff report, there was some commentary about the Olin report and potentially some incompatibility. Can you talk to, is that being resolved with the setback issue? I wanted a little bit more transparency on what that is and where that stands.
Sure. And again, this is the version that you read in the staff report has since been refined, but at that time, it appeared that the frontage along Hawley was not perfectly aligned with the frontage of the YMCA building, which is what is called for in the Olin study. Otherwise, the other setbacks along Garfield and at the corner are being met, and that is also being reviewed by the Design and Historic Preservation staff to ensure that it's consistent with the Olin report.
So just to feed that back, is it your sense that the design as it evolves will be consistent with the Olin report?
That's our expectation, yes.
Okay, that I just want to make sure I heard you properly. Great to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson. Public comment?
We'll call in Anthony Manousos to provide public comments. Anthony, it's *6 to unmute your phone. There you go. Go ahead.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to applaud Councilmember Kennedy for supporting this project and for being a champion of affordable housing for low and very low income residents in our city. I'd also like to commend the City Council for approving this project. It will send a powerful message to all who come to see our majestic City Hall that Pasadena is a city that cares deeply about the marginalized and low income residents of our city. We're not hiding affordable housing in some undesirable part of our city. We're proud of it and placing it in the heart of our civic center. To me, this is a powerful moral statement that makes me proud of being a Pasadenan. Finally, I'd like to applaud National Corps for being an outstanding developer and being sensitive to the design standards of our city. I can't wait to see this project when it's complete and open in the next 2 years.
Thank you. That completes public comment on this item.
Thank you. So I think that this item is on for information purposes as a PPR. It's under old business. Unless there are any other questions or comments, this matter is complete. Next, we'll move on to item 8, and this is the recommendations from officers and department, and we'll begin with the item 8, California Grade Separation Project Update.
Thank you, Mayor. Director of Transportation, Laura Corneo is entering the room along with Deputy Director Joaquin Case. We're providing an update to the council today as it relates to this potential problem, and we're seeking some direction from the council. That's why this is not an information item. We're ultimately asking for the council to direct the staff subsequent to the presentation and responding to questions that council members may have. So with that, let me turn it over to Ms. Cornejo.
Ms. Cornejo, Mr. Sikis, welcome.
Great, thank you. Mayor, members of the City Council. In coordination with Metro, we conducted some high-level analysis of what the implications of moving forward with the grade separation at California Boulevard would be. Based on that analysis, we are recommending that you consider directing us to identify other transportation solutions for what would have been the 710 North Corridor. Mr. Sikis will walk you through that analysis and walk you through why we have that recommendation before you today.
Thank you, Laura. Honorable Mayor, council members, the Metro Board allocated Measure R Mobility Improvement Program funding to grade separate the Metro L line at California Boulevard. In today's presentation, I'll provide some background on the collaboration between city staff and Metro staff and recommend that the City Council direct the city manager to identify potential projects to submit to Metro for consideration in lieu of the Metro L line California Boulevard grade separation project. In addition, it is recommended that City Council find this action is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA guidelines, Section 15061B3. I'll begin with some background. In November 2018 and September 2019, the Los Angeles County Metro Board of Directors authorized programming of Measure R Mobility Improvement Program funding to jurisdictions along the 710 North Corridor. This funding is intended to address mobility challenges as a result of the 710 North Freeway project not moving forward. As part of this programming, Metro allocated a total of $230.5 million in funding to the city of Pasadena to be used to complete the environmental study, design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction of the Metro L line grade separation at California Boulevard. Immediately following the award of this funding, city staff coordinated with Metro to review the feasibility of the potential grade separation project, discuss project management alternatives and tentative project schedules, identify potential alignment alternatives, identify project constraints, and refine the conceptual level cost estimates. It was through this collaboration that we were able to evaluate some of the physical and operational constraints that play a key role in the potential alignment: the cost, the schedule, and the schedule of the project. So first we'll start with the physical constraints. The right-of-way for the Metro L line tracks is typically about 30 feet from Glenarm Street to Del Mar Boulevard. On both sides of this right-of-way, there are properties which have institutional, medical, commercial, retail, and restaurant use. This is a very narrow alignment and very difficult to construct a grade separation within that 30-foot right-of-way. Second physical constraint was the Lrt stations, the light rail transit stations, north and south of this crossing. The Fillmore station is located approximately 600 feet south of California Boulevard, and the Del Mar station is located approximately 1,800 feet north of California Boulevard. Another physical constraint was the adjacent intersections. Raymond Avenue is 150 feet to the west of the grade crossing, and Arroyo Parkway is 150 feet to the east of the grade crossing. There are also some operational constraints. First being the construction duration. During construction of a grade separation, California Boulevard would need to be closed between 18 months to 4 years. So this is the section of California Boulevard between Arroyo Parkway and Raymond Avenue. In addition, the capacity of Arroyo Parkway might be reduced during a portion of the construction period, depending on the type of grade separation constructed. Another project constraint, operational constraint, is that this grade separation would need to be built along an active rail operation. As such, it would require a parallel track, otherwise known as a shoe fly, in order to run train operations during the construction period. This would also require a bus bridge during certain portions of construction. A bus bridge is not a bridge for buses. What it is an operational term used to identify when you have to remove people from a train onto a bus. They take the bus to the next station and then board the train again. So there are various project alternatives that were reviewed, and all of these constraints impacted the project alignment, the project cost, and the project schedule. Basically, there's 4 unique alignments when considering a grade separation. If you keep the tracks at grade, you can either bring the roadway over the tracks or bring the roadway under the tracks. To start, we eliminated the option of keeping the tracks where they were and building the roadway over or under the tracks because of the proximity of the adjacent intersections of Raymond Avenue and Arroyo Parkway. There's significant challenges. First off, physically, we cannot bring the roadway over and under the tracks in that 150-foot section and still have clearance for either the trains or vehicles. And there'd be significant challenges to incorporating those intersections and those parallel streets into a grade separation project. Instead, we took a closer look at grade separation alignments that focused on shifting the tracks over or under the roadway. So first is the rail aerial alternative. In this alternative, the rail alignment, so the tracks, will be raised 24 feet at California Boulevard. This would require the vertical alignment to begin the transition approximately 1,500 feet south of California Boulevard. So I had mentioned before, the Fillmore station is within 600 feet of California Boulevard. So the Fillmore station would have to be reconstructed and raised by 9 feet in order for the tracks to be elevated to a level at California Boulevard where vehicles could pass underneath the tracks. The second alternative was the rail underpass. In this alternative, the rail would be depressed 30 feet crossing California Boulevard. Fillmore Station and Del Mar Station would not be impacted, but there'd be significant utility impacts, including a 45-inch city storm drain and a 54-inch LA County storm drain underneath the crossing there. This alternative is also estimated to have a very long construction schedule and much higher cost than constructing a bridge over the roadway. The third alternative was the hybrid alternative. And in this case, the rail would be elevated 19 feet and the road would be depressed 3.5 feet. By doing this, Fillmore Station would not need to be reconstructed. The rail elevation would connect north of Fillmore Station, so the tracks would not start their rise until they're north of Fillmore Station. but there would still be some underground utility impacts, but not the storm drains mentioned above. This alternative 3, was identified for future right-of-way impacts and to develop a conceptual rough order of magnitude cost estimate. City staff and Metro staff also discussed the potential of rail signal control in lieu of a grade separation. In this scenario, trains would operate as if they were running in mixed flow operations, stopping at the grade crossing through the use of signal control. However, the issue that we ran into is the use of gates with signal control. Gates require signal preemption, and that signal preemption is what leads to the delay at the adjacent intersections. Based on the grade crossing geometry and the adjacent land use, we would not want to remove the gates at California Boulevard since they provide a significant safety benefit for the crossing. So through this initial evaluation, we considered a hybrid approach as having the least impact and the lowest cost, and Metro agreed to carry out additional analysis of this hybrid option. In April of 2020, Metro provided the city the results of their initial assessment. That's included as attachment A in the agenda report that was provided. The work carried out did not include design work and was developed at a very high level, intended to provide the city with preliminary understanding of the project area constraints, construction challenges, potential L-line service, and roadway network impacts in a rough order of magnitude cost. Based on Metro project assumptions regarding the project area constraints, the potential property impacts, and operational challenges, the project was now estimated at over $577 million. Also, based on standard construction scheduling forecast, the total construction schedule was estimated to take up to 4 years. It was understood by city and Metro staff that further analysis and coordination would need to take place to better define the project and the associated potential benefits and impacts. So at the request of former Mayor Terry Tornick, the Foothill Gold Line Construction Authority reviewed Metro's assessment and assumptions. The Construction Authority's review included some key assumptions that resulted in significant project cost and construction schedule reductions. However, for these assumptions to hold, Metro would ultimately need to provide, review, and approve these assumptions. The most notable assumption reflected in the Construction Authority's work was to eliminate the construction of a shoe fly. Again, the shoe fly is this parallel track that is used during construction when the main track is in construction. Eliminating the shoe fly would reduce the construction cost, it would reduce the right-of-way acquisition and cost, and it would reduce the construction duration. Passenger service along the L line would continue, but passengers would need to get off the train at a station north or south of the closure and take a bus to the next available station. Then they would get back on the train. However, stopping rail operations at California Boulevard creates significant operational challenges for Metro, since the Monrovia Operations and Maintenance Facility services rail equipment for a large percentage of the Metro light rail transit fleet. And this yard would be disconnected from the rest of the system without a parallel track. To address this, the Construction Authority recommended the use of Metro's Midway Yard in downtown Los Angeles in lieu of the Monrovia Maintenance Yard. City staff discussed the use of Metro Midway Yard and extended bus bridging to eliminate the need for a shoe fly with Metro during coordination meetings. Metro's assessment reflected that the Midway Yard would be at capacity by the time the the grade separation entered construction, so it would not be feasible to shift the L-line trains to that facility. In addition, while it is expected that bus bridging would need to be done during certain sections of construction, rail operations expressed serious concerns over long-term bridging, given the potential inconvenience to riders and estimated loss of ridership. However, by building in these assumptions into the review, the Construction Authority's modification of Metro's cost estimate came in at approximately $183 million. In addition, the Construction Authority assumed that double shifts would be allowed for construction, so allowing construction during 16 hours of the day, reducing the construction schedule to 18 months. So this slide provides a side-by-side comparison of the cost estimates. The key differences are highlighted in yellow. Elimination of the shoe fly accounts for a $175 million difference. When you take into account the actual cost of construction, which is $117 million, the construction contingency, overhead, and profit, that's all built into that total construction amount. In addition, the other key difference is the right-of-way acquisition cost. A majority of this cost difference is due to the removal of the shoe fly, since that parallel track would require a significant amount of right-of-way acquisition. However, in addition to that, the initial assessment does not account for more recent land use changes within the city that further constrain the project area, and if the properties were to be acquired, would further increase the cost of the project. While the costs identified by the construction authority are considerably less than the cost identified by Metro, they include assumptions that would likely not be feasible to implement, and the more conservative Metro cost estimate should be considered to be more realistic. There was also a significant difference in the schedule provided by Metro and the construction authority. The construction of the shoe fly would take between 9 and 12 months. Once that shoe fly construction was complete, the cutover from the shoe fly to the existing tracks would take about 4 to 5 months. So unlike building a parallel roadway where you can just remove barricades and redirect traffic, when you're cutting over a fixed guideway like light rail transit, you have to rebuild the portion of the tracks and all of the associated track circuits where that cutover occurs. This process can take that 4 to 5 months. The grade separation itself, based on the Metro schedule estimate, would take 2 years or 24 months. The construction authority, assuming double shifts, reduced that window to 18 months. Once that grade separation construction is completed, we'll be able to tie it back the main line and remove that shoe fly. Again, about a 4 to 5 month process. And in total, the closure of California Boulevard between Arroyo Parkway and Raymond would be between 3.5 to 4 years of no traffic on California Boulevard between Arroyo Parkway and Raymond. Again, the construction authorities in reviewing the schedule with the removal of the shoe fly reduces that construction window down to 18 months of a closure on California Boulevard. So city staff reviewed the cost estimates, construction schedule, and adjacent land use potential construction impacts to traffic circulation, and we reviewed the potential impacts to adjacent neighborhoods during the construction period, and determined that the recommended cost and potential impacts outweigh the benefits of constructing a grade separation on an active light rail transit grade crossing at California Boulevard. Within the past 3 years, the city has implemented various projects to enhance the safety and mobility of the California Boulevard grade crossing at the Metro L line. Transit preemption time and corresponding traffic signal operations have been modified to reduce delay to motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists. Signalized intersections along California Boulevard between Fair Oaks Avenue and Marengo Avenue now operate using an adaptive traffic control system. This provides real-time traffic signal timing adjustments and response to traffic conditions and the L line train activity. In addition, an extension to the adaptive traffic control system will be constructed in 2022 to extend the adaptive system on California Boulevard from St. John Avenue to the west to Lake Avenue to the east, further reducing delay along this corridor. While there continue to be opportunities to better address motorist delay and queuing during key travel times associated with the train operations, the intersections on California Boulevard adjacent to the at-grade crossing operate efficiently and do not demonstrate any safety concerns. Based on the staff evaluation of the Metro and the Construction Authority analyses, as well as the staff's assessment of the corridor mobility needs and challenges, staff has determined that other transportation solutions could more efficiently address mobility needs, reduce intersection delay, and address multimodal safety along streets within the 710 North Corridor, including California Boulevard. Staff would like to proceed with the recommended next steps. First, to identify projects that could be advanced and move the California Boulevard grade separation, accounting for multimodal needs and opportunities along the 710 North Corridor. Staff will prepare an updated project list that builds on the project list that was approved by City Council on January 20th, 2018, and development of that project list would return to City Council for approval in early 2022. At that point, staff would coordinate with Metro for consideration of funding reallocation. This proposed action is consistent with the goals of general plan mobility element, addressing policies such as continuing to invest in innovative technology to help improve access to all transportation choices, applying management measures to manage vehicular speeds to ensure safety and orderly movement of all modes of travel, and pursuing funding opportunities such as grants to implement projects that contribute to the city's mobility element objectives. This project has been reviewed for compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act and is exempt per Section 15061B3. A decision to review potential future projects does not result in a significant effect on the environment. And as projects are identified and the planning process begins for each project, an environmental analysis will be conducted for each project individually. The identification of additional projects would be completed using the Transportation Department operating budget. Any potential projects identified by staff would again be presented to City Council for approval before being submitted to Metro for consideration. The fiscal impact of those proposed projects would be identified at that time. So there was
Mayor, if I may, first of all, I want to thank Joaquin for that great summary. To paraphrase down all that he walked through, this was a project that 20 years ago, the city would have embraced. We wanted a grade separation when they brought what was then the blue line to Pasadena. At that time, it was financially infeasible, and so the only way to get that was to have it at grade. Now, some 20 years later, Metro has allocated what appears to be about half the money to do a grade separation that would be extremely disruptive to the city for potentially 3 or 4 years. The construction authority has offered some other suggestions that may reduce the cost. As Joaquin walked through, there's a lot of unknowns with that. We would be on the hook for any dollar amount above the roughly $250 million that Metro has allocated to the project. From the staff's perspective, we think given the improvements and the investments that the city's made, but also the big game changer here is the progress we're making on the 710 relinquishment. We think those two things in combination really suggest that rather than go back to an idea, a concept that made sense 2 decades ago, we should think to the future and work with our partners at Metro to come up with a different set of projects approved by this council that would fit better into the future without the 710 and the relinquishment to the city. And so that's really where the staff is coming from with this.
That's a good summation. Thank you, Mr. Sikas, Ms. Cornejo, and City Manager. Before I turn to Mr. Madison, whose district this is in, let me ask for public comment.
The one public comment speaker we have is not checked in. It's Erica Foy. So,
okay. Mr. Madison?
Thank you, Mayor. As I think you all know, I've represented this area for a long time and actually have firsthand knowledge of some of the discussions and developments that the city manager, to which he refers. I'm not sure I would quite agree that grade separation itself is a 20-year-old solution. But I understand why the city manager describes it that way. And let me repeat, I think, what he represented, which is absolutely true, which is the time to do grade separation was at inception, was when this project was initially developed. But unfortunately, the funding wasn't there, and we were assured by what is now Metro, what was then the MTA and the authority, that the insertion of the at-grade crossings would be seamlessly worked into the 1,500 red light signals that we have every day already at California and Arroyo Parkway. Now, for those of us who aren't engineers, traffic engineers, or any kinds of engineers, that strained our credulity to think that there was any system developed by humankind that would be that efficient. But we were assured over and over that that was going to be the case. And more importantly, as Steve Mermel indicated, that if we held up the project for the grade separation, the result would be no project, that we would not have the blue line, which ultimately became the gold line, and which is a huge asset for us. And more so as it's further developed and as climate change continues to manifest itself. So I think this report has been a long time in the making, and I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation. I still believe that grade separation would be great if we could snap our fingers and have it. But unfortunately, that's not how major construction and engineering projects work. And, the costs one would have to assume, as Mr. Marmel indicated, would just go, up and up, and we'd be left holding the bag for that. So I think this is the right decision. This will be disappointing to many residents who have hoped for years that we would try to address the occasional or periodic gridlock that they experience, on these east-west arteries like California and Del Mar. This, of course, would only address California. The one question that I have is one that I'm not sure can be answered at this point in time, but is, what we'd hate to do is lose that funding. We have lots of other projects that we can move forward with. In fact, I remember when this project was selected, there were a number of other projects that were on the table in Pasadena that would assist the regional transportation goals and also address the termination of the 710 project. So I guess my question for staff is, how realistic is it to believe, and I think it'll make a big difference to the community if we'll be able to hold on to that funding and use it in other effective ways.
Councilmember Madison, we have had preliminary conversations with Metro. They have indicated support and working with us in identifying other projects to which we could reallocate the funding. Those projects would still need to meet the funding criteria as set forth by the agency, and so they would be primarily to enhance mobility along the corridor, along what would have been the 710 North corridor. Ultimately, this decision to reallocate the funding does go to the Metro boards, and since they are the body that allocated the funding. But at every level that we have had conversations, there is support for us to reallocate the funding.
So what I'm hearing is we're optimistic about that. We can't guarantee it, but
Correct.
To a large extent, it's in our hands, both our staff and our team, and also this council to make the case that this is the right decision. And so I guess then my question, Laura, is are we sure this is the right sequencing of things, that we should take this step? Is it a necessary step to take to then begin to explore that alternative that you just described?
I think it's important for us to hear from council that there's a willingness to look at other projects, that moving forward with the grade separation is not something that we have determined to be feasible, so that we can invest the time and the resources to develop that project list and then engage Metro and ensuring that project list would be supported by the Metro board. So I think hearing from council this evening is an important step in moving this forward.
Okay, thank you, staff. Thank you, Mayor. And I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation.
I just have a quick follow-up on that, and then this clerk has some correspondence to report, and then I'll turn to my colleagues. But the question that Mr. Madison asks really is the $250 million question, whether the timing is whether we should go to the Metro board first and ensure that we're not going to lose the dollars. I think is important. When this is one of the first projects I was briefed on after last year, and at the time I recall the price being around 500 million. Now it's 577, and so cost prohibitive is an understatement. But and that combined with the fact that we're proceeding with relinquishment of the 710 corridor is great news, because now we can look at the area in its totality, all of West Pasadena, Southwest Pasadena, and traffic flow. But the assurances that we need from Metro, and I mean, this is maybe a chicken and egg thing. Do we take the first step and then they pull the money, or do we go to them and say, this is the direction the city is headed in? We'd like you to reallocate the dollars to think of this corridor as a corridor and not as one intersection. And that's the question that I hear out loud. And frankly, I have the same question. And so maybe staff can respond to that. I mean, is this in terms of timing, is this a necessary step right now, or can we give an indication that we're prepared to head in this direction, and we'd like an indication from Metro that those dollars can and will be allocated to the city for purposes of traffic flow in the southwest corridor and part of the city.
So again, based on the conversations we've had at all levels within Metro, from staff up to Metro's CEO, there is support for us to identify another set of projects, assuming it aligns with the funding criteria. In terms of timing, we were deemed to start drawing down on these funds in the coming year. So there is kind of a time constraint for us to advance and move a project forward and show that there is a need for this funding within the city, or risk having Metro determine that they need to reallocate the funding to other jurisdictions along the corridor. We think that there are ample projects out there that could help us advance mobility along the 710 North. And so we don't see there being an issue with us being able to identify projects. We would want it to be an inclusive process. And so it's important to know from council that there's support to advance other projects, so that when we're engaging the community, we're engaging Metro, we know that this is a direction we want to move in a timely fashion, so that we don't risk losing those $230 million.
I will commit to the council and ask maybe Mr. Madison and Mr. Wilson to join me, that we'll make our rounds with Metro and its appointed body, some of whom we know, to ensure that they understand what we're attempting to accomplish here. Mr. Clerk, and then I'll turn to, I don't know who was first, I believe Mr. Masuda, then Mr. Vice Mayor Wilson, and then Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mayor. One letter, the correspondence received by the city clerk's office on item 8. One letter was received expressing concern / disappointment with the potential cancellation of the grade separation project near California Boulevard and Arroyo Parkway. And one letter was received in support of the staff recommendation, commending the city for its renewed focus on ways to improve traffic through a more realistic analysis of traffic impacts being felt throughout Pasadena. The correspondence was posted online, distributed to the city council as part of the record for this item. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Masuda, with your permission, I'll call on on Vice Mayor Wilson, given his district is immediately adjacent and also impacted. And then I'll turn to you. Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Masuda, Councilman Masuda and Hampton, for letting me slide in. Steve did ask, I think, a lot of the relevant questions. And I think for me, the city manager said this was probably the right solution 20 years ago. Well, 20 years ago, they were still building the Gold Line. They probably could have underground this thing, say, cost effectively. And now it's kind of like doing repairs in your house. When the window of opportunity is there, you have to seize it. And I think at this point, it feels like that window has closed. I did want to also caution us a little bit. Joaquin mentioned that the queuing has gotten better at that crossing. We can't forget that we've been, in COVID land for the last 18 months. So I don't think our traffic patterns are necessarily reflective of what they would be in normal times. And I'm hopeful that we will continue to be our pathway to normal times. So Joaquin, can you comment about your statement that things have improved, and whether that's being driven in a meaningful way by changes in traffic patterns as a result of COVID?
Yeah, definitely, Vice Mayor. What we're looking at in traffic patterns, our traffic now is about 85% or 90% of what it was pre-COVID. Our volumes are coming back up, especially this past month with school now being back in session. But I think overall, globally, some of the improvements that we've made along the corridor with the adaptive traffic control and working with Metro on the preemption timing really go beyond the volumes themselves and really speak to what we've done to integrate the light rail system with the traffic signal network. And that will show much more benefits as the volumes do come up to a higher level, and we can adjust the signals accordingly with that new adaptive system.
Are there other more modest investments? Because at $250 million or $500 million, this is I don't think the return on investment is there. that can be made to continue to further improve traffic flow at that intersection? And obviously the other at-grade crossing is at Glenarm. Are those innovations you just referenced at California also being translated to Glenarm, and are they future things that can be done?
They are being translated to Glenarm Crossing and Del Mar crossings, with the caveat that Glenarm and Arroyo Parkway is a Caltrans intersection, so that causes some difficulties for us. But the intersections around that, so Marengo and Glenarm, Raymond and Glenarm, and Fair Oaks and Glenarm, all have this adaptive system. And the whole network, we've created this grid adaptive system that's going to be extended with the second phase of adaptive traffic control. So for California and Del Mar, that stretches further east and west, which allows more of that throughput to be managed at the signals and reduce the delay along those grade crossings.
The only reason I mentioned Glenarm is that, walk that route, and I've seen, as you mentioned, the queuing coming back all the way from that on-ramp headed over to Los Robles. So I don't, doesn't mean that this project, I guess we shouldn't kid ourselves that there's still backup and meaningful congestion as a result of the 3 at-grade crossings. But I do think, given the price tag, it's a little bit of return on investment. This is a huge amount of money, and I'm wondering, we could hopefully have the patient open at the 710 stop. So this is kind of the time to kind of make the investments that we wish we had made maybe when the Gold Line was being built, is thinking about how we more timely make infrastructure investments to repatriate that part of our city, but also have the right transportation infrastructure. My sense is that, maybe this is to Laura, is that kind of where we're thinking most of these dollars could be allocated? It's a huge piece of land. I have no idea. There's not a traffic engineer who estimates these things, but I would have to think that those types of changes around how our transit works and our traffic works and our road system works would be, expensive in this type of order of magnitude. Is that kind of the basic narrative that you all are contemplating?
I think we're looking at 2 kind of buckets per se. We're looking at mobility challenges that exist currently, regardless of what happens with the relinquishment, where we think we could implement some transportation solutions to address mobility. And then we also think that there would be an opportunity, assuming relinquishment moves forward as we expect it to, and to be able to start kind of addressing some of those near-term transportation solutions to start kind of changing what we've been talking about, making these corridors feel a little bit more local to freeway, not freeway to freeway as Metro has treated it for quite some time and Caltrans has. So we think that there are kind of these 2 buckets of transportation solutions that we could look at and consider with this funding.
I assume these dollars are earmarked for 710 mitigation. It seems obvious, but I'm sometimes surprised that obviously things that are obvious don't always work, but addressing infrastructure improvements around the 710 stub and relinquishment, would that satisfy the nexus requirement for these dollars?
The funding criteria is pretty narrow. It does have to address mobility, specifically capacity enhancement along the 710 North Corridor. So we're pretty confident that starting to address some of those opportunities that would present themselves with relinquishment would qualify. Some might fall outside the funding criteria. But again, that's why it's important for us to start developing that project list and engage Metro so that we are certain that the project list we bring back to council for approval is one that meets that funding criteria.
And I think the other one that I know we discussed in some detail at MSC was the electrification of our transit fleet and the need to have a new bus transit kind of center. And that was, I can't remember, a fairly significant price tag. Is that something that also might be a candidate for these dollars?
That would not qualify based on the funding criteria. It would have to be strictly capacity enhancement. We would be able to weave into those project descriptions multimodal improvements, but as intended, it is strictly capacity enhancement with vehicle capacity being primary. But again, we could weave into those projects pedestrian and bicycle enhancements, and we've been having those preliminary conversations about how to do that.
Okay, well, I think, thank you. There's my questions. And I think the key one is timing, and do we need to have kind of good projects so that we don't kind of release the funding and it becomes a jump ball again and we lose access to, I think, significant dollars. I'm sure we could come up with higher impact projects. I think this could be a high impact project, but given the dollars and the disruption, I can't even imagine having California closed for four years. That could be, incredibly disruptive to, the center core crossing, east-west crossing of our city. So thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson. Mr. Masuda, followed by Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Joaquin, for the report. I had a hard time hearing you. I was hearing some echoing, so I have some earphones on right now. I know that all the council members are disappointed with the fact that there will be no grade separation there, but it's so important. I agree with Council Member Madison that we have to retain those funds, those $250 million for mobility funding. So very, very important. So I support that, and I just wanted to let you know that let's keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Masuda. Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, everybody, for the presentation. I really appreciate it. Was information that I too was not satisfied with the actual answer, but I understand that those are dollars and that's a very expensive project. And unfortunately, we didn't have the foresight, or maybe we did a long time ago, to do I guess the over crossing. But we are where we are now, and hopefully this is not something that we just give up on and don't think about or come back around to. I did have questions that were very similar to Councilmember Madison and Vice Mayor, as well as Councilmember Masuda, as it relates to the funding, because I would hate for us to lose any of this funding. And hopefully we find other projects that will be able to suit the dollars. And while I was, just having a conversation and just thinking about, historically, how train tracks have broken up communities, I think about the freeway and how the freeway came about and who was there when the freeway was originally supposed to be built and when the 210 was built, right? And those were primarily Japanese and African-American families, communities and households and businesses, et cetera, that were stopped because of us trying to move cars through our community. And so as we're looking at where the dollars potentially can go, there were promises made in those communities as it relates to making sure that they have a fair and great quality of life living in the city of Pasadena. One of those promises that were made were sound walls on the 210 corridor, which never ever came about. And since the 710 is not going to happen anymore, there may be an opportunity to use some of those dollars to protect those families that are still, that were displaced and moved to other locations within our city, Japanese and Black families, to give them that quality of life that was originally promised. So as we are having these discussions, Laura, in transportation, I hope that you are always looking at the opportunity for sound walls in the areas that Caltrans and Metro, or actually Caltrans, but now Metro, has made those promises. So those are my statements. I don't really have any comments. I just wanted us to look at, how train tracks have broken up our communities, but also how the freeway has displaced a prominent Japanese and Black cultural, the cultural abundance that we had in this community. And now it's time for us to really look at what we're going to do to, make sure that those individuals know that they are loved and respected, and Pasadena wants them to be here, now it's time for us to come through on the promises that were originally proposed. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. Okay, I think Mr. Kennedy, I didn't see your hand up. Mr. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mayor. One thought I have in listening to the comments, particularly those related to forecasting. I remember Cynthia KURTZ intimately involved with what was then known as the blue line, now the gold line, and she immersed herself in every detail. Now, I suppose that she has not been following every bit of minutia related, but some of these are legacy issues. And I'm wondering, would the council think that if we had time, that would be good to have her collaborating with the current city manager on these issues before the council takes action. So I'd be interested to know, Mayor, what the council and what Mr. Ramel thinks about that.
I think those conversations are already occurring, Mr. Kennedy, and at the time we had a representative on the, originally it was supposed to be the red line, and it was the blue line, and then the gold line, and it's been about every color line. And we did have, well, I wasn't around, but it was before my time, but there were representatives from the city, then city council at the time on the authority. But those conversations as part of a transition are occurring. Mr. Madison, you've made a motion, what's your pleasure? I think, this is, relinquishment has been a game changer, and hopefully we'll have control of that corridor sooner rather than later. I think what the staff brings us is a recommendation to take control of those dollars. The question, and we're receiving reports that Metro is going to work with us. But the question is, will the Metro board approve it? And that's the question that we don't have much insight to at the moment. And I don't know that we will before we can take an action. Mr. Madison does have a motion, and I believe it's been seconded.
And Mayor, all I would say is it may be that there's an implied step in the second part of the staff recommendation, and that is, I assume staff would come back to the council with proposed projects in lieu of before going to Metro.
Yes, absolutely.
Kind of events, yeah. So
Yes.
with that understanding, I would move the staff recommendation then.
Okay. The clerk tells me it hasn't been seconded. Mr. Wilson, did you want to?
Yes, with Mr. Madison's clarification that we actually do see that, portfolio of alternative projects. Happy to second.
And again, we'll reach out directly to Metro with the assistance of staff and make sure that they understand from the council's perspective what it is that we're trying to achieve in looking at that corridor in its totality and bringing some desperately needed relief in terms of traffic and traffic circulation. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Kennedy, I didn't hear you. I don't know if you were on mute.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda. Yes, he said yes, and he waved his hand. Okay, Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you, Ms. Cornejo and Mr. Sekas for bringing this to our attention, and we'll more to come on this issue, and I'm sure we'll be in contact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to The next item, and this is item 9, and potential amendments to the development agreement related to 100 West Walnut.
Thank you, Mayor. David Reyes, Director of Planning and Community Development, along with Jennifer Page, the Deputy Director, is stepping in to the chambers as Laura and Joaquin are stepping out. We're bringing this item today to the council to discuss what possible amendments might be made to the development agreement with Lincoln Properties for the project at 10 West Walnut. The original Phase 1 project included with the development agreement provisions related to local hiring, the local sourcing of materials, local contracting. Mr. Reyes will walk through the level of success that's been achieved thus far. With spoiler alert, I suppose it hasn't been as robust as this council or staff would have hoped, but there are some potential amendments that could be made to the development agreement for a possible Phase 2 of the project that we think would yield some superior results. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Reyes for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Marmel. Thank
Wait,
you.
Mr. Reyes, before we move on, I said 100 West Walnut. Is it 100? I thought it was 10 West Walnut, and our agenda report say 100. It's both? Okay. Want to make sure it wasn't my eyesight. Okay.
Yes, sir. Mayor, thank you, and City Council. This is an important project, the biggest project in the city's history, and I think it's notable that the City Council had requested and ensured that we did have local hire provisions within the development agreement. So this is the first private project that had this kind of language in it, and I think that we've learned from this project. But I think that the language that exists in the development agreement today is really aspirational with respect to the local hire goals and local contracting goals. And so we've talked before about the applicant meeting and being compliant with the development agreement, but the city really not seeing everything that it would have liked to have seen. So I wanted to walk you through. Obviously, we were here. We've talked about the project in terms of what it is. I'll just briefly remind the City Council that Phase 1 is almost complete, which is the 475 residential units as well as 210,000 square feet of office uses. So they're working towards finishing up by December. Phase 2 is approximately 400,000 square feet of commercial uses, which the applicant team has indicated they are moving forward with. And I think that really gives us an opportunity as we move forward. We've talked about the project site. I think the council is well aware of the project and what it is. On February 8th, we came before you with an update, and we shared where they were with respect to Section 10L, local hiring, the mentoring, local contracting. And in short, they didn't achieve the goals that were outlined within the development agreement. And we received some direction from the City Council to continue working with them, seeing what we could do now to help bolster the numbers. And also, how could we strengthen Phase 2 if it moves forward, because we don't want to be in the same position for the Phase 2 development project. And so with respect to local hire, as I reminded the council previously, the applicant team did hire Mr. Ron Matthews, and then the city hired Mr. Prentice Diedrich. And I think the two of them have really helped with the applicant to improve the local hire numbers. So on February 8th, we reported 112 workers from Pasadena. The most recent numbers that we have are 228 workers from Pasadena. Actually, we expect that to go up because these numbers are from the end of the summer. So we do expect that number to be even more. On the local contracting side, because the project was almost completed with respect to contracts, we were only able to see a 300,000 square foot increase, $300,000 increase in that number. With respect to mentoring, they doubled the number of folks that they hired from the Flint Ridge Center, going from 18 to 30. And then they partnered with the Mentoring and Partnership for Youth Development and donated $25,000 for new computers, which we think is a fantastic thing because it was needed. But I think as we move forward, I think that there's an opportunity, especially with respect to creating a PLA. I think this was discussed. Again, this was a new process for staff and the city in terms of how these private projects might enhance and engage in a local hire opportunity. I think a project labor agreement would provide the city with real enforcement opportunities and provide clarity about what's required, and I think identify how the local hire numbers could be achieved. I think it's important that what's being presented to you tonight and what's in the staff report is that we would want direction from the council to actually negotiate. We're pretty close, but to negotiate with the applicant team actual amendment to the DA that would bring forward to the council. This idea that they want to expand to 30% is important, but I think it's also important that we look at the numbers and what's actually being proposed by the applicant team in terms of how they would seek to achieve those goals. And it does include, as we understand, identifying a local hire to extending to those beyond the city and within a 10-mile radius. So I think these are things that we want to continue working on and have the city manager help negotiate as we move forward. We do think that there's an opportunity for phase 2 to provide much better clarity on what's actually going to be required and what the deliverables might be, so that we can see. I think it was fantastic that the city council put this in the development agreement, because it did result in significant benefits to the community. Not I think the benefits that maybe we would have envisioned, but I think without those numbers we would have had nothing without the development agreement requirement. And I think for phase 2, it's really important that we, I think, nail down what would be required and really be able to hold accountable the applicant to deliver. And so the request here and the recommendation by staff is to direct the city manager to continue the negotiations so that we can bring forward an actual amendment to the DA that we would present to the city council at a future meeting, so that we can have something in place for phase 2. The applicant team, Mayor, is available for questions, as is staff. I think their entire team is on the line and ready. They don't have a presentation, but are available for any questions that may come up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reyes. This is disappointing, the report in terms of what the numbers were. And I recall when this came forward to the council, and was easily predictable at the time. And here we are a few years later, and as some predicted, Pasadena's largest project, and the numbers on local hire are nowhere what they should have been. And so hopefully for phase 2, we can correct that. Mr. Kennedy, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Ditto on your comments. West Walnut appears to be an extraordinary development for our community. I had the opportunity about 2 weeks ago to tour most completed sections of the development. One of the things that I don't know how we got definitive commitment that cannot be changed out for recognizing by monument the displacement of African Americans, Japanese Americans, and Latino Americans. Their land was bereft from them, but somehow in the translation from the legislative record in the council meeting discussion, it was all conditional language that actually ended up in the contract. So that's a dichotomy that I still find difficult to understand. And the director of development for the city gets to hold back their final occupancy until they actually put up the storyboards that are, I think, approximately 6 feet tall, that commemorate, acknowledge that this land at one time was really taken by eminent domain by a body set up by the council called the PRA, Pasadena Redevelopment Agency, disbanded by really under the leadership of former Mayor Bill Bogart, thankfully. So what I want to understand from staff is whatever we decide, are you going for still a discussion of seeking a commitment for local hire, local sourcing of materials, and local contracting, as opposed to what's in the report, which seemingly is only addressing 30% local hire and expanding the radius from City Hall to, I believe it said 10 miles.
Councilmember Kennedy, as I understand your question, I think that the short answer is it would look to include better and more enforceable language for both local contracting and local hire. I did mean to reference, if I did not, attachment B of your report, which does spell out some of those potential changes. And that's a letter dated July 30th from LPC West, a project labor agreement, amended local hire goal, local utilization plan. And I think it's that local utilization plan that I think would help us really develop better quantitative indicators for the local contracting. And so that would be something that we would definitely come back to the council with and share that local utilization plan, or LUP as it's known. So it would be in addition, as part of this larger project labor agreement, we would have the local utilization plan. And I'm sorry if that wasn't clear in the report.
Just to be clear, so if we were able to hammer out a project labor agreement, you see that we would have teeth in an agreement that has the three areas: contracting, local sourcing of materials, and also the workforce.
The mentoring, yes.
Okay, so the only issue I had with that, Mr. Reyes, is on page 1 of attachment B. I noted that under the first bullet, second bullet, it only referenced local hire goal be 30%, and all those other areas. And this is a letter from LTC West, Lincoln Property Company. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
And the applicant team is here. It would be staff's intent. Again, the development agreement is a two-sided document that the applicant has to agree to, but it certainly would be staff's intent to move forward with amendments that address all three areas that you identified. And we could get clarity from the applicant team if that's desired.
That might be helpful.
We do have 13 public commenters, and so why don't we ask for someone to answer that question, and then we can move forward.
Jade, will you bring in Mark and Rob, Mr. Rob Kane and Mark?
Mr. Kane, did you hear the question? You're on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Great. Good evening, everybody and members of Pasadena City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to work closely with the city and continue these discussions to improve the local hire program based on the reality of the city's available construction workforce and the lessons we've learned in phase 1. Our team has spoken with a number of stakeholders here in Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley and in the larger region. And these conversations have really worked to strengthen our local hire efforts, which continue to steadily improve. And we're proud of the progress we've made on local hire and the contribution that the project has made to the community. I think with respect to the questions, the specific questions being asked, what I'd like to do is to introduce one of the experts that we've been working closely with as we think about the next phases of the project, and specifically Chris Hannon. Chris is the Executive Secretary of the Los Angeles and Orange County Building Construction Trades Council. Chris and his team obviously have a great expertise in local hire and training and apprenticeship, which is why we've been working closely with Chris and in partnership. And he's obviously been integral as we craft and think through the programs that we're sharing with you today. So I'd like to, if I can, hand it over to Chris to help elaborate on these programs. I think it would be helpful to hear from him if we can bring him in.
I think we're clear about the local hire program because it's in your letter. What is not clear is the local contracting and the local sourcing of materials. So I'd like you, Rob, Mr. Kane, if you would hit those two or address those two areas, because your letter is clear about the possible negotiations related to the local hire goals.
Of course, and again, these are all three of these are going to be important processes that will dictate the process for the sourcing of materials and the efforts. And so I think it's really important that the LUP, which the city will approve, will certainly wrap all of those together. But again, as it relates to these specific, all three of these specific initiatives working together, I really think it's going to be a partnership with Chris and his group to achieve the numbers that are being set forth. So I think it's important that we bring Chris into the discussion so that we can talk collaboratively about how we plan to achieve those.
Since we have limited amount of time, so long as we have your commitment, Mr. Kane, to continue to negotiate with the city for those three distinct areas, that's what I'm really trying to get at, as opposed to Mr. Hannon telling us anything more than that. And I was trying to really be sensitive to what the mayor had just said.
I think, and we'll let the record reflect that Mr. Hannon has joined us, but I think, Mr. Kane, the question is directed towards you in terms of the local hire provisions and, I'm sorry, the contracting provisions and the willingness to commit.
Yes, the simple answer is absolutely yes.
Okay, thank you. City attorney, so there won't be any problem in this new negotiations, assuming that Lincoln Property does the second phase of their development. We're not asking for conditional language this time around, and I didn't think we were asking for it the first iteration. But I think we're clear, at least I think we're clear. I hope we're clear. Are we clear? City attorney?
I believe we're clear, and I understand there are further negotiations.
Thank you.
Hold on, Mr. Kennedy, if we can let the city attorney answer.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Excuse me, I just said, yes, I believe everything is clear, and I understand there will be further negotiations, and I'll defer to Mr. Reyes to clarify and provide any additional information.
Okay, and then my second piece or questioning is, I think all of us have seen some of the steps that the state have taken, the county has taken related to property that was taken by eminent domain by minorities. We possibly don't have that kind of latitude or ability to give back the land to Japanese Americans, Latino Americans, African Americans that had their land taken by eminent domain. But we do have the ability to do several things very clearly. One is issue an apology. Two, under the mayor's leadership, get the PLA in place. And I think that would go a long way with a good corporate leadership, or with good corporate leadership from Lincoln, to take to put a better taste in at least one council member's mouth about the whole project. One cannot deny the beauty of the project. It's a fantastic project, but there are some issues underlying that need to be addressed, Rob. And I just want to thank you for the tour that I took, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton, and then we'll turn to public comment.
Oh, it's totally fine. I could go after public comment.
Let's turn to public comment.
Before I call the first speaker, who will be Isaiah Robles, followed by Shamari Davis and Anne Marie Ote. We want to announce, first of all, due to the number of speakers, we're going to go to 2 minutes. And then in terms of correspondence, City Clerk's office received 5 letters stating support and appreciation for the Lincoln Parsons project at 10 West Walnut, and expressing gratitude for efforts to hire local. Those comments were posted online, distributed to the City Council, and are part of the record for tonight's meeting. So with that, we'll bring in Isaiah Robles, followed by Shamari Davis. Isaiah,
good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Isaiah Robles. I'm a resident of Pasadena. I'm actually a former construction worker. That's how I started working in labor. But I'm speaking today as a resident to ask the City Council to adopt the changes to the PLA, or the amendments to the PLA. These types of agreements create great jobs, middle-class jobs for, especially in this case, residents for Pasadena. It allows people to change their socioeconomic status immensely. I'm actually, I experienced that myself, working as a young man in construction and being able to work a middle-class job that earned me a wage that a college graduate was earning. So these jobs not only allow residents to be proud of what they're building in their community, but also to move themselves upward and buy a home for their families. It also, with the local hire requirements, allows for people in different positions in the city of Pasadena to be able to work on these projects and get these jobs. It helps people in NC3 programs, which are programs that help underprivileged people from around the area, formerly incarcerated individuals, females working in construction roles, which is a great step forward that we've been pushing in construction, and it's helped veterans adjust to life outside of the military. So with those comments, I just ask that the City Council really adopt the amendments and approve the new amendments for the PLA. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Shamari Davis, followed by Anne Marie Ote, followed by Johnny Kanji. Shamari Davis, go ahead.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Shamari Davis. I'm a business representative for IBW Local 11, Electricians Union here. We have an office in Pasadena. I'm also just a former Pasadena resident, but also Pasadena City College graduate of their electrical technology program, which got me into the union. I originally took this job as a business rep because I wanted to make sure there was equity in outreach and make sure that IBW looked like all of LA, which is multifaceted, right? Very diverse. And that's very important to the local hiring and the mentoring that we have implemented at IBW Local 11. We have a tutoring and mentoring program to make sure folks are able to pass our test and also look at our facility and see the investment that we've put in it. And that's why these PLAs are so important to people, not only in the LA County community, but more importantly, Pasadena. We've definitely outreach to Flint Ridge Prep, which we love to, we have some members that are already, were in that program that are already in our IBW, and we want to continue to make sure that's a strong partnership to make sure that we can meet
45 seconds.
higher requirements. So we are excited and we want to hope you approve these amendments for the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anne Marie Ote, followed by Johnny Kanji, followed by Kathy McLaren. Ms. Ote, go ahead. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is Anne Marie Odie. I am a longtime Pasadena resident and the very proud aunt of a Hamilton Bobcat. We have strong roots here in Pasadena. I'm here as a representative of the Los Angeles Orange County's Building and Construction Trades Council, representing 150,000 skilled men and women in 48 local unions and district councils. And we do urge the City Council to approve the amendments to the development agreement. This new agreement will contain a project labor agreement with the Los Angeles Orange County's Building Trades Council, and we have worked very closely with Lincoln Property Company West on this. It includes several features that will greatly improve economic opportunities for the men and women living in our city, increasing targeted local hire to 30%, bringing apprenticeship slots to graduates of our authorized MC3 apprenticeship readiness program. And this includes an exemplary program based here in Pasadena at Flint Ridge Center. These programs prepare students to enter trades apprenticeships. I've been to the graduations of the Flint Ridge graduates along with many of you. They are emotional events. There's much at stake. These graduates face great challenges in life. Many of them are born and raised in Pasadena. They are our own residents and neighbors, yet our city has not always worked to include them. This agreement will make our city a fairer and more equitable place and open up lifelong careers to those who need them most. We look forward to their joining the building trades, and we strongly support this new development agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Johnny Kanji, followed by Kathy McLaren. Linda Chung is not checked in, but has a speaker card.
Good evening, Honorable Gordo and council members. My name is Johnny Kanji. I'm a business agent for the Ironworkers of Local 433 for the last 5 years. I am also on the Planning Commission within my own city of Buena Park. I do sit on the Centralia School Site Over Committee regarding Measure N. So I am heavily active in my own community. Over the last year, I've kind of partnered in with the community, Pasadena Community College. So our contractors are always in dire needs of certified welders. I've heard a lot of good reports of Pasadena, the students they're turning out. So I've gotten to meeting Misty Henry, who is the lead instructor from the college. And we have brought in from the Flint Ridge program also several of your guys' residents and surrounding communities. Unfortunately, they haven't had the opportunity to work in their own town yet. So I do support this project labor agreement on the Parsons building, because I like to do, offer you guys as an investment to help you guys out give career opportunities. When I say that, people get that a little mistaken of jobs and careers. Careers, we're talking about providing a mortgage paying salary with health benefits and retirement. And I think we all know that's a big problem in this country. We have people that don't have a retirement and health benefits. And we're
25 seconds.
Figure out a solution, but that's what we provide. But I would be curious to know how many, I know in the earlier presentation with the local hire, how many people offered a career rather than just a job. So I do support this. I think you guys are doing the right thing, and I ask that you support it. Looking forward to being a partner with Pasadena for a long time, guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kathy McLaren, followed by Linda Chung, who still hasn't checked in. So we would move on to King Moore, then Tony Trinidad. Tony Dead Trinidad.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Kathy McLaren, and I'm a business developer, and I work for the National Electrical Contractors Association, which is one of your local businesses here in Pasadena. I really support amending the development agreement to ensure that the local hiring, which is so important for the Pasadena community, because when workers work locally, it really improves their quality of life. It improves it for themselves and their families. We have seen many times when a worker can work close to home, they can then participate in some of the community's activities, possibly giving back to having their kids play in baseball leagues, being coaches, doing all kinds of things with their families, and really being part of a community. So it's very important to give these opportunities close as at home for them.
50 seconds.
So, yes, so I am just urging you to vote yes on this, amending the development agreement, because I think it's the best thing for your community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda Chung did check in, so we will call on her, then followed by King Moore, then Tony